Wano Country is finally almost done. No, we are not quite there just yet. We are very close to the finish line of Wano Country, and new pastures await. Thank God. It's been over 4 years for Wano Country. Ups and down, all the way around. This arc has been a wild roller coaster. After it's all said and done, I do wonder where people are going to rank this arc in their top 10, top 5, maybe not even top 10. Who knows? That being said, though, if you want to see my live stream reaction to this chapter over here, boom, on my Cold Requiem channel, and of course on my twitch.tv channel, link in the box below to those. And of course, for the anime reaction content, you go to where? Boom, my Kingu-san channel, link in the box below. And the exclusive reaction is going to be on my Patreon as well. Once again, links in the box below. Now, for this chapter, as per usual, the breakdown, we go to the pacing and the chapter structure. We have the character components of the chapter, and of course, we have the story progression components for this chapter, which for this chapter is the lion's share, easily. So on that note, let's get right into the pacing and the chapter structure. Now, this chapter has a total of 5 parts. Number 1 is the flower capital after the party. Number 2 is a quick shift to Kuri at Okobori Town. Number 3 is back to the flower capital in conjunction with Zunisha, and a few time skips where we go forward in time about 3 times. 3 times. Then number 4 is Tokage Port in Udon, and then number 5 finally is the flower capital again at the end of the chapter. So even though there are a bunch of cuts in this chapter, most of them are actually within the flower capital region for the part 3 section of the overall pace of this chapter. Though we do skip forward in time, again, around 3 times. 1 main time, and then 2 other minor times. We skip forward in time when Carrot pops up, since Kinemon is no longer there near the Dukes, and then the Mink, like it's a mist, just kind of form out of nowhere. And then we shift back to the Straw Hats again for the flower capital. Since Shinobu's recovered, then we also skip forward in time again when we see the Straw Hats. And then there's that final main time where we do go a few days into the future officially. The overall chapter pacing is relatively good, but when it comes to the structure for the chapter, it is a bit odd, particularly for that one section of the chapter. And then also, going back a few chapters, for chapter 1053, when Oda placed Kinemon and Otsuru in the celebration panel at the end of that chapter, it seemed very strange as all hell to find out that actually, no, they were in the capital, they were in Kuri in Okobori Town when that panel was spliced in at the same time the fireworks went off. And everyone was kind of gathered in the flower capital except those 2. So that was a bit weird, I think, in terms of structure for that chapter in hindsight. So that being said, the pacing, I think, is again relatively good, but for a 5-part chapter, which normally is a relatively good thing for One Piece, the structure in this chapter seems a bit odd, so it's not as good as what I thought it could have been. Now for the character components for this chapter. Number 1, Shinobu plus potentially Raizo, we're not too sure. So Shinobu has gone through a vegan-based liposuction and is in prime form. This might mean that Raizo's also changed physically, but Oda hasn't shown us Raizo's new form yet if he has one. So this metamorphosis is pretty comical, is pretty weird, but at the same time, it was probably hinted at happening when Queen lost a lot of his water weight, let's quote, water weight, in chapter 1053, when the man literally says, "I'm supposed to be the guy that stays round," when Green Bull is sucking Queen. Right. So, you could argue it was something that back then, that Shinobu, since we see in this chapter, and she's been sucked by Green Bull, well, there was a good chance that she'd also get skinny. And then Shinobu is going to be Otama's ninja master from now on. And since Otama wants to be a Byuchi Kunoichi, it would make sense for Shinobu to train her and also herself look bewitching. So that's number 1, character Shinobu. Number 2, Otsuru. Very quickly, Otsuru was burned over her face as a result of Hold'em's actions in chapter 953. Like literally almost 100 chapters ago. That has come back, that's crazy. It's coming back into play now when this arc is almost over. This happened when Okobore Town was burned to the ground by Hold'em back then. And you have to wonder, where is Hold'em? Like seriously. There's a lot of characters that have to wonder, what happened to these people? They were there and then just vanished like a Thanos snap. That's number 2, Otsuru. Number 3, Carrot. Now, the qualifications that Neko and Inu have for character to be the next leader of the Mokimo Dukedom all seem to encompass the same thing that they experience. So just how Carrot snuck aboard the Sunny Go in chapter 823 when Luffy and the crew were going to Totoland, Neko and Inu also did the same thing on Whitebeard's ship Moby Dick in chapter 964 during the Oden flashback. They also snuck onto Roger's ship. Both Carrot and the former lords have experiences of stowaways on ships and going into the outside world and experiencing the harshness of the outside world. The Duke seem to value that a lot. And of course, Carrot has also inherited the Will of P. And the Will of P, we all know, is equal to the Will of D. That is very obvious. And P in this case being, not Pound, Pedro. And remember that Pedro himself also had experience in the outside world as the leader of the Nox Pirates to find Poneglyph years ago. So maybe Pedro would have been the ideal next leader in Inu and Eko's minds if he were still alive. Which, of course, he is most certainly not alive. Right, Oda? Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Now, next is Sukiyaki. This is going for both character and story later on, just in case. But Sukiyaki apparently, seemingly, had a change of heart off screen, where he did tell Momonosuke and Hiri that he was their grandfather. Even though 3 chapters ago, in 1053, he said he had no intention of telling Momonosuke, which is strange. So again, I have to assume that he had a change of heart and he did so off screen for whatever reason. So it could be expounded upon later on in, let's say, a Robin flashback. Let's say we're going to like the next island and we find out various things that happened during Wano country that weren't shown to us, like during this break. And then we get these flashbacks while we're actually en route to the next island rather than still being in Wano country. Something of that sort. Because my guess has always been that Oda wants to kind of wrap this arc up ASAP, and us being in Wano country still is kind of irking Oda a little bit. That's my assumption. That being said, though, we also know on his part, Sukiyaki's part, that some of the scabbards didn't know that he was, in fact, Sukiyaki. Of course, outside of Kinemon. So his change of heart might involve them as well, but at this point in time, we are just really not too sure. Now, the next part, and the last, I'm not trolling you, the last part of character is Yamato. Yamato has steeled her resolve, and the Viz says, and I quote, "Well, I made up my mind. Guess I'll go to Luffy and his crew. I'm going to live the way Kozuki Oden did." Yamato right now is mentally untouchable and wants to set sail with Luffy and the Straw Hat Pirates. So the idea that we talked about before in our first take, when it was her going on her own journey by herself, no, she wants to go with Monkey Jesus. It is what it is. And that is the character component for this chapter. And now finally we have the story progression components for this chapter. And we start off in a very holistic mood with the Lord and Savior of the Mega Church, the Katakuri, and his right-hand man, Oven, versus Germa 66. So the last time we saw Germa was in the cover story of 1052. And Caesar Clown was in the area, and he could be the key to their escape. But remember though, Brule did tell Cracker in the chapter 1048 cover story that Ichiji and Reiju were somewhere in the area. They were in Totoland. So she might have told Katakuri and Oven the same thing, either before or after Cracker. Also, Katakuri has 0 wounds / bandages on his body, so he has recovered from his battle against Luffy. Whereas Cracker still has those bandages on his body, which would reinforce the idea that he can't stand pain. He said it before during Whole Cake Island against Luffy in that fight, and the fact that Katakuri is recovered, but Cracker hasn't, that does go in lots with that idea. In the current cover story, it seems to be Ichiji and Niji versus Katakuri, and Reiju and Yonji versus Oven. Now, Caesar Clown or maybe even Judge can interfere at some point in time. Yes, possible. But I also want to say this last thing too. We do know based on the trailers for the One Piece Film Red movie that Katakuri and Oven are in Film Red, which I cannot wait to see. I cannot wait to see it. And by the way, yes, I'm going to try to avoid spoilers until it's actually available in theaters sometime in the fall over here in the US. Now, moving on here, for the entire battle with Green Bull, Kinemon was in Kuri with Otsuru. This explains why Kinemon didn't show up when Green Bull pulled up, because Otsuru had claimed to Kinemon's Kintama for the entire night, which is well deserved considering how she's been a soldier for 20 years. Very impressive. After this, we have, of course, Neko and Inu are going to stay in Wano Country and serve Momonosuke as, of course, his vassals. There have been ideas about this happening for a while now, so I'm not overall surprised about their decision. And then Kari will be the next ruler of the Mokimo Dukedom, but put a few question marks, asterisks on that, because it's not confirmed at this point in time that she wants to do this, and she is showing hesitation at the idea. And even though she is not the smartest or strongest mink, she does have that experience that many folks in the entire country lack. And part of me thinks that Oda's doing this as a wholesome goodbye, at least for a while, for Carrot, since she doesn't seem to be joining the crew. Is it possible that she joins the crew? Possible. But it seems very, very unlikely at this point in time, and that is, I think, undeniable. After Carrot is Sukiyaki. Now, Sukiyaki has officially revealed himself to Momonosuke and Hiri as their grandfather. This is actually low-key a bigger deal than what most folks would think, since Sukiyaki knows the ancient language of the poneglyphs. He can both read and write them. In the Viz, he says, and I quote, "I have things I can teach you, but that is all I'm good for anymore." The Viz strongly notes the idea of him teaching Momonosuke something that he doesn't know, which of course in this case would be, once again, the ancient language, and continue the legacy, the tradition of the Kozuki family line. Because Momo couldn't learn from Oden, but now he can learn from Sukiyaki himself. After this, unfortunately, very sad news, Robin did not see ancient weapon Pluton, which means that Oda may not have the desire to tell us or show us what it looks like for quite some time. I still have faith in the idea of Big Mom and Kaido knowing what it looks like when they were underground, but or at least a part of what it looks like. But let's wait and see what the future holds on that one, obviously. After this, we have Frankie. Frankie and the rest of the crew now know that Pluton is in Wano Country. In the process, either Luffy or Sanji confirm that the blueprints that Frankie destroyed are for Pluton itself, and not for some counter like some folks theorize. So the idea of the counter Pluton, that theory is off the table for the time being. And then also, Luffy, of course, unlike Kaido or Big Mom, has no interest at all in the ancient weapon Pluton. It's a given. Moving forward, of course, Shinobu goes through liposuction, and Tom will start her training under Shinobu. And then Luffy says a line that's very intriguing here, where he says to her that Tom can join the crew if she learns ninjutsu. The implication here is that for as long as Luffy is alive, the Straw Hat crew will not disband. So I like that idea, where in the future there could be a case here where we do have a Cabin Girl Otama. Is it likely? Not really. But maybe one day she would join the crew. After that, we have Caribou. Caribou overheard, once again, the talk about an ancient weapon. In this case, it's Pluton. So that means that in the future, low-key, if Caribou's in the area, there is a chance that Uranus is in the area. Wherever Caribou goes, it tends to be the location of where an ancient weapon is. He's a magnet for these things. So if we're in Elbath or in God Valley and Caribou's there, looks like Uranus could be right around the corner. He is telling a quote certain someone about Pluton being Wano country, and there's, honest to God, a lot of options here. Whether it's Morgans, Blackbeard, CP0, Dragon, Buggy, etc., there are a lot of options here. However, there is a very good chance, a very strong chance, that no one is going to get it / can get it. Because remember that Wano country is protected by a natural fortress that Momonosuke said to leave closed. The giant walls of Wall Rose around Wano country. And it's only when those walls fall can Pluton be unleashed. And it seems that the walls falling involves who, or what I should say, Zunisha. And Zunisha is somewhere walking the oceans once again. Finally, we know that in chapter 1051, the narrator gives us a confirmation of Momonosuke's shogun status. And in the process, the narrator claims that Momonosuke will be known throughout the world as the great shogun of Wano. It implies that Momonosuke will bring great prosperity to Wano country as well as safety. So I think it's very unlikely that someone else would take Pluton from Momonosuke's regime when his regime is that legendary, or at least be that legendary. After that, we have the Straw Hats are finally leaving the Flower Capital for good. But they did not tell Momonosuke or Kinemon. Notice how Kinemon and Momonosuke are the same two people that first joined the Straw Hats on their journey in Punk Hazard. Those two were left out, and they were the first two of the scabbards of the clique to hop on board the Sunny Go. I think it's very possible that we get a Vivi-like moment with Kinemon and Momonosuke. When Yamato joins the crew, they're there watching from afar as they sail off into the sunset and leave the country for good. After this, we have Green Bull real quickly, where Green Bull, we do see the after effects of the environment changing around Udon in the Tokage port, where it is overrun by overgrown trees and plant life and stuff like that. After this, we have, for the first time in Straw Hat crew history, each of the crews pick their destinations based on the new log post. Heart Pirates go to the northeast, Kid Pirates to the east, and the Straw Pirates to the southeast. They're going like straight up, or I guess straight down in this case. This is the first time the Straw Pirates have ever followed the new log post. Granted, it's not Nami's log post, but Nami got her new log post in chapter 653, the end of Fishman Island, and never used it once moving forward for the entire journey in the new world. Not a single time have they used it. The reason why it needs 3 needles rather than the 1 is because the magnetic fields of the islands themselves can change, which was not the case at all in Paradise. It is stated that even some islands can even lose their fields completely, somehow, some way. It kind of gives you those vibes, once again, of the good old days. Absolutely. And then also, we get a map now of where Wano is located. And Wano is surprisingly located very close to the northernmost calm belt. It's very intriguing here. This might be how marine ships or government ships get to Wano country, because they have the ships that are coded underneath with Kairoseki. So they use the calm belt channels that are filled with gigantic sea kings, and they go into Wano country like that. After this, we have the biggest component for story in this chapter, the formation of the Cross Guild. This is huge. An actual global change play led by none other than Buggy the Genius Jester, Buggy the Bombastic Clown. And his wings are Dracula Mihawk, the world's greatest swordsman, and Sir Crocodile. We have 3 former Shichibukai working together, led by Buggy. And this is a massive play for the world because the cross-guild company that Buggy leads has started putting bounties on Navy, on the Marines. Wow. That is a gargantuan, magnificent play on the part of Buggy. Quote Buggy, folks theorize it's actually Crocodile's idea. Crocodile does know that Buggy's a fraud because Crocodile was there with Buggy and Impel down, seeing Buggy flop and flail and just absolutely suck on so many levels. However, before the Crocodile and Mihawk team up, Buggy did lead a global enterprise of mercenaries across the world. So Buggy is pretty savvy when it comes to this kind of stuff. And the main question here is, how can he get the money to actually maintain the system that appears to be based off of Doflamingo's system of stars, and I guess crowns as well? It's a very intriguing thing here, but now we know how Buggy has achieved Yonko status. Whether he's going to be below 3 billion, above 3 billion, we're not too sure. But Law says, and I quote in the Viz translation, well, if he's got 2 men of their stature working for him, he deserves to be called an emperor. So Buggy himself had a tremendous amount of clout as a Shichibukai before SSG and the Reverie, where he was seen as equals to Boa Hancock and to Mihawk and to Kuma and other Shichibukai, Weevil as well. And of course we know that's not true, but the world views Buggy in that light. Law and Kid do clearly. We have 3 former Shichibukai teaming up. And the idea with Crocodile too is that Crocodile is stronger now than he was, like vastly stronger now than he was when he first fought against Luffy back in Alabasta. Oda himself did admit that Crocodile came too early into the story, and we see over the course of Marine Ford him clash against Doflamingo, Mihawk, and Akainu. And knowing Crocodile, his forces should not be light by any measure. Baroque Works was a clear indication that when Crocodile has subordinates, he has a vast number of subordinates. Mihawk, Perona tags along, maybe? Who knows? And then with Buggy, he has a substantial mercenary force across the world. Duh. So that is how you get Yonko status. And I'm kind of guessing that he may have territory in the New World, but that's my guess. After this, we have Law giving the rubbings of the Poneglyph to Kid and his crew, though keep in mind, at least they shouldn't have it, Luffy and his boys have 3. They should have only 2, because the one on Zou should just be in the hands of Luffy and company. Maybe Luffy and company gave a rubbing to Kid and Law? Maybe. I can see it happening in the good old sense of competition? No. Quick correction. There's actually a good chance that both Law and Kid have all 3 rubbings, because Law was there on Zou and probably got the one on Zou. And then Kid took the Poneglyph rubbing from a commander of the Big Mom Pirates, therefore it's probably the same one that Brook got when he was on Whole Cake Island. And I believe that was probably Snacks, because Snacks is the only commander that has a degree of ties to the worst generation. But on top of this, they talk about, and I quote, finding the man with the burn scar. What is this? This person with the burn scar appears to be a gateway that all of a sudden comes out of nowhere that allows for Kid and his crew, as well as Law and their crew, to maybe gain access to actual knowledge of what the Poneglyphs say. Now, there's options here, like number 1, for example, a 3-eyed clansman like Pudding. Number 2, Ohara? Did somebody else survive the Ohara incident? Because when he says that, and then Luffy says, burn scar, what do you mean? Law has a very serious face on, and then it cuts to Robin. Robin's like, huh? What do you mean?
What do you mean by that?
Did Clover survive? Even though he got shot, did he somehow survive the incident at Ohara? Or did someone survive when Akainu blew up the ship, the passenger ship? There's options here. So this requires a theory video, because I do remember that Clover did have I think it was either a lion or a tiger or some sort of cat on the back of his jacket, and then that could be a loose tie to the Sunny Go, which is also a lion. So there are options here when it comes to this person, but apparently Kid and Law, they know, which is probably due to their experience in the New World, being more than Luffy and his crew, because they went to the New World immediately. So there's a pathway now for Law and Kid and potentially other folks that know about this man with the burn scar. So Blackbeard would also know, probably. There is a pathway for people to actually gain more insight on the poneglyph rubbings, even if they don't have a Three-Eyed Clansman or Robin. Duh. That's okay, Oda. That one seems a bit...
Not yet.
But finally, we have the last component for the story progression, and of course, that is Yamato. And Yamato wants in. She is coming full steam ahead to join the Straw Hat crew, and Momonosuke and Kinemon are going to probably tag along with her as they go over to the port area in Tokage Port to have her join the crew and say their farewells. And that is the story progression component for this chapter. Final thoughts. Overall, this chapter I think has clearly a lot when it comes to the story components of this chapter. The main ones being the cross guild stuff, and of course the stuff involving the person with the burned scar. This is actually arguably bigger than the cross guild, because the cross guild, it changes the face of the dynamics of the Marines versus the pirates. In this translation, Kid says specifically the Navy's been used to doing all the chasing, but these days they have to fear assassination from civilians. So even regular people now are going to be targeting Marines because they want that money. And that's a big deal. But for the One Piece itself, the person with the burned scar now allows for essentially anyone, as long, I guess, if that person with the burned scar likes this pirate crew and is willing to work with them in some capacity. This person opens up the floodgates again for the One Piece race. Pudding was one floodgate that opened up after Robin and the Three-Eyed Clan as a result of that. Fair. But now we have another one, and it's going to be an all-out war to find this person who can help them find the One Piece itself. And this one does throw me off, because how many avenues are there going to be to get to Laugh Tale for pirates that want to get the One Piece? There's so many now. The Three-Eyed Clan, who are barely even touched upon the story, but have such an important ability, they are potentially a major avenue. Momonosuke will probably soon be, because there's a good chance, again, where Sukiyaki is going to teach Momonosuke the ancient language. And now there's some random person who also can help them get to the One Piece too. How many avenues? My God. Robin really doesn't feel all that special anymore at this point in time. So when we get to Laugh Tale, it could be pretty crowded. Outside of that, us Yamato fanboys, oh, very good stuff, very good stuff. And the Carrot fans, trust, okay? Because right now, things aren't looking too hot for your girl. She, in the future, she'll be back, without a doubt. But join the track crew on the greater adventure, like Carrot in Elbath, Carrot in the Emerald City, Carrot in God Valley, Carrot in Laugh Tale? Unlikely. I'm not saying impossible, but seemingly very unlikely. Again, my main issue, I would say, is the structure of the chapter. The story components are kind of a bit weird too, some at least weird. And character, Sukiyaki is a big assumption on my part. Again, I have to assume that he had a change of heart, but why? We have no idea. No idea. So this chapter is nowhere near as good as the last chapters. I would say it's like a 7, 6.5. Let's say a 7 out of 10, because I could say it's between a 6.5 to a 7.5. I'm going to say a 7 out of 10. A good chapter of One Piece. And honest to God, with my agendas, with my agendas going through the roof, this time with Mihawk, you love to see it. Absolutely you do.